free market economy collapse. No, it didn't. It's because you put a market mechanism on top, a socialist mechanism on top, which collapsed the market economy.
So the carbon footprint is the approach of a new socialism in your mind?
I've been trying to avoid that rhetoric, because that's the rhetoric of the far right, you would say. But it's not the rhetoric of the far right, it's just the rhetoric of looking at what's happening.
Yeah.
It's just that's what's happening.
That's what seems to be happening. It's kind of clear that's what's happening. If you want a one world government, then you're going to have some kind of socialist agenda in there. And it seems to be happening as we speak. You're in Australia. How do you see the next few years unfolding in Australia vis-a-vis everything that you've been doing, vis-a-vis global warming? How do you see the future? Are you positive?
Australia is a wonderful country. It is a privileged country. It has, 40% of the world's uranium. It has thousands of years of coal. Has some of the cheapest energy production in the world. It's a dry land, it's a dry continent, and there are problems with water, true, but they would be much less of a problem if we didn't crucify our energy industry by whacking on a massive tax. If we kept energy production cheap like it is, it's much cheaper than most other countries, then the economic miracle that is Australia, that managed to go through the credit crunch hardly unscathed because of they're in bed with the minerals industry with China, true, so there's a big link there. But Australia is one of the few countries, Western countries in the world expanding still. They want to have, 35 million by, 2050, is that the date? I think Kevin Rudd has planned. And so it's one of the few countries that's still expanding, is still having immigration coming in, and generally people who move here are economic immigrants who are generally educated. Doesn't matter what culture you come from. Well, there's an issue of immigration and culture. There is problems with perhaps unbalancing cultures if you bring in too much of one culture, but that's another issue altogether. But the idea is this country is having a net increase of people, of educated people, and has a fine, bright future, really. And people like my parents would say, God, you're lucky to have left Britain. It's just overcrowded and under-resourced. And as a Canadian, it's very similar to Australia. They're also a country full of resources and generally underpopulated with such a large size of land. So it's a good place to be on the whole.
Yeah, I don't think many people in Japan would answer that right now. There are many problems beyond the economic right now, but the economic problems are exacerbating mental problems in Japan right now. That depression has become a serious problem. Suicide rate is continuing to go up. The quality of air really is bad compared to here. I mean, I noticed it right away when I arrived. So you do live, as you say, in a very privileged environment. Nature is still very abundant. I mean, I feel it as soon as I arrive. And obviously, you don't have global warming. I mean, it's like, it's a middle of summer and I'm sitting here. It's quite cool, actually. That's right. And Obama coming back from Copenhagen, and he couldn't even fly back to the White House because there was so much snow falling. Northern Europe, this particular winter, especially Britain, I mean, hello, it's kind of obvious that this is not global warming. If anything, sunspot activity is...
Oh, we like to chuckle at the fact that most of the Northern Hemisphere is some of the worst winters they've had in 20, 30 years. But of course, I'll be the first to say this could be a blip.
It could be a blip, yeah.
But it's still just humorous
to
say that we're having global warming. And then some people like Chinese ministers still saying that the cold snap is more proof of global warming because it's destabilization, some sort of weird logic. Is craziness. Of course, we could be in global warming, and we could still have a cold winter, because global warming is a long-term phenomenon. And even 20, 30 years is a tiny short time frame to qualify anything as a global warming.
Yeah, I think it's also very significant that it appears that Al Gore has disappeared off the face of the earth. Haven't seen or heard of him at all. that literally 2 years ago he was the popular hero. He was all over Hollywood.
Nobel Peace Prize.
He was winning prizes left, right, and center. If that's not an agenda, I mean, I myself made a film, and when I look at An Inconvenient Truth, I mean, this was nowhere near a contender for any kind of prize at any film show, and yet it won the Oscar. Huge Hollywood support for him, and in Japan, all of the stars were lining up there to be at his reception, to just be with him, because he was the new prophet of the church, of global warming. But this prophet seems to have fallen. Any news on him?
Well, I was sucked into the Inconvenient Truth. When I watched Inconvenient Truth, I believed it, and I thought, you know,
I did
like,
too
wow.
at the beginning.
I was like, wow.
Wow.
Whether Al Gore is ignorant and truly believes what he's saying, or as his bank balance may say, he's someone with vested interest. His portfolio was worth 100 million at one point, pre-credit crunch. He's got companies and hedge funds set up profiteering. And as far as I've heard in America, if you profiteer from a problem that you have created, that is fraud. So you can be indicted for it.
Very important.
So if you create the problem and then profit from it,
yes.
So he's in trouble. And that's why he's underground, as far as I can see. He's underground now. And winning a Nobel Peace Prize in 2007 was a complete undermining of my respect for the Nobel institution. The Nobel institution.
Now, as it was with Obama, I mean.
And Obama, why did he receive a Nobel Peace Prize?
He's a war president. He's a war president.
What has he done?
He's sending more young Americans to their deaths, is what he's doing, with this incredible convoluted logic that is so prevalent today, that bamboozles people so easily. And this, I think this is the crux of our whole discussion. You know, you talked about the Royal Society, and when you read something written 100 or 150 years ago that came out of that great tradition, the great European tradition, when people could think, people could actually think, and they could see things through, they could think things through. Maybe they had more time. We've got more information, we've got better education, but what we don't have is the ability to think things through.
TV takes that time away. You can get into one sort of camp of philosophy that we're video idiots, and that they're churning out, you know, insipid, mundane mass media just to keep us, you know, opiate of the masses almost, you know, it's like an opiate of the masses. That's possibly true. But, you know, having your big brother is also, there's nothing wrong with having entertainment. But maybe there's too much entertainment time and too little think time. Perhaps. Depends on the individual, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. I'm just quite staggered, though, that it can be so obvious to certain people like yourself and like myself that we do have a population that is being bamboozled at more and more successful levels of bamboozlement with very, very cheap stories that I think a couple of generations ago, people would have, their so-called bullshit fact filter would have been right up there. No way. But you know, the British people, I remember even a couple of years ago, they were doing questionnaires, and the average British person 2 or 3 years ago was saying, "I don't go for this global warming. I don't believe it. It just doesn't feel right." And that was your average working man in the street. And I thought, oh, that's hopeful. That's really hopeful. And then suddenly, within a very short space of time, there was Gore, there was An Inconvenient Truth, there was the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, there was all this.
Scientists. There's allegedly a consensus of the world's leading climate scientists that there's global warming. This consensus, if studied accurately and look at the peer-reviewed literature, can really be nestled down to 53 people. However, 700 of the top climate scientists, heads of the departments, professors, have signed a US Senate minority report saying they are skeptical. That is not consensus.
Yeah, that is not consensus. So the key word for the whole thing is consensus, which doesn't exist. Absolutely. Well, that's given us a lot to think about, James. I'm very appreciative of your time.
Thank you very much for giving me this time.
We'll use it skillfully in Japan. Apart from the great global warming swindle, I haven't really seen very much out there that is so heretical in terms of a full frontal assault on the established theory. I think we've got to see a lot more of this. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.